Hey everybody, welcome to NFL Fantasy Live, presented by EA Sports, Madden NFL 22. Patrick Claybon, glad to be here with Kimmy Checks and Marcus Grant on a Would You Rather Wednesday. Kimmy, would you rather limp into the playoffs, make it to the championship and fail, or win every single game and lose in the first round?
Oh, limp into the playoffs, maybe? You can't like win every single game and then be completely like down. That's just such a tease. So I think I'd rather limp.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with her there. If I can make that scrappy run all the way to a championship, that's one that you remember a whole lot more. At least you remember a lot more pleasantly than you remember your first round flameouts.
No, you guys are wrong. I'm hanging up a regular season championship banner. And we're going to do that because I signed up for a free fantasy league at NFL.com/fantasy or by downloading the NFL Fantasy app so you can join and play fantasy football with us. We got a pair of running back related headlines to start today with. Earlier this morning, NFL Network insider Ian Rappaport breaking the news that the Rams trading for former Patriots first rounder Sony Michel. Going to be an all-Georgia backfield in L.A. potentially, Marcus. Are you tempted to pick up Michel on draft day now that he's out of New England? And what about the guy who benefits under Josh McDaniels and company?
Yeah, I don't know that I'm super excited to go get Sony Michel. I mean, he's a guy that wasn't going very high in drafts to begin with when he was in New England. I do think he's going to have a role in Los Angeles. I still think, though, that this is Darrell Henderson's job. The good news, though, is if you like Darrell Henderson, the draft price might have gotten a little bit better for you. I think this mostly for the Rams was a move to add depth, especially after the Henderson thumb injury. On the flip side, back in New England, this only solidifies my growing love for Damian Harris. I was starting to draft him in more spots. I was feeling more confident. This definitely increases his opportunity there. I do think that James White, Ramondre Stevenson are going to be guys that are going to have a role, but I think at this point they are, next to free essentially in drafts. You don't have to spend draft capital, certainly on Stevenson, and probably not a whole lot on James White either.
Yeah, crowded backfield in New England gets a little less crowded. Now, let's go over to Jacksonville, where we've got some good news. Congratulations to Jags fans. Urban Meyer finally names the number 1 overall pick, Trevor Lawrence, as the starting quarterback. But there's also miserable, dreadful news. NFL Network insider Ian Rappaport reporting Jags rookie Travis Etienne, Trevor Lawrence's teammate in college, suffered a significant foot injury in the Jags' second preseason game. He's been placed on IR, and that means he'll miss the entire 2021 season. Very unfortunate for the young man. We wish him the best. Kimmy, what's this going to do to James Robinson's value?
Let me first piggyback off of what you said and saying let's uplift Travis Etienne. Really sad news, but hoping that he makes a safe return next season. Now, for us fantasy managers who benefited from James Robinson being an undrafted free agent and then rising to the ranks of fantasy football dominance, it looks like that can happen again if Etienne is not on the field. Now, as a reminder, as it stands right now, James Robinson has an 8th round ADP, the 28th running back off the board, which is quite interesting seeing as he finished as the RB number 5 in terms of fantasy points per game and 7th overall in fantasy last season. The thing about James Robinson is he's not only rushing the ball, he also is a pass catcher. You mentioned Urban Meyer, now names Trevor Lawrence, big surprise here, as the week 1 starter. James Robinson should move up your fantasy draft board. We saw what he did last season with a not-so-great quarterback situation. Him and Trevor Lawrence could be a very dynamic duo in fantasy football.
Yeah, a lot of teams that won the championship last year did so because they were able to go get James Robinson, another opportunity for him. Unfortunately for Travis Etienne, he was taken in the first round. He's got some guaranteed money. Get well soon, man. We're looking forward to you in the 2022 draft. Let's move on to an all-star team of sorts. We'll call it the first team all disrespect. Fantasy managers like you guys watching have been letting some of last season's top fantasy scores drop on draft day, and that's going to make them mad, and they're going to score more points because of it, because we know they are motivated now. Is the lack of respect warranted, or is it overthinking, though? Kimmy, let's start with Aaron Rodgers. He's the MVP, the QB2 last season behind Josh Allen. He's now the 7th quarterback off the board. What gives?
Are you guys just mad at him because of all the media circus over the offseason and the summer? This is so disrespectful. And we saw what happened when Aaron Rodgers felt, I guess, kind of semi-disrespected last season with the Packers. He was the MVP of the entire league. An ADP of being the QB number 7 off the boards is insane to me because the Packers finished with the most points per game in 2020, and Aaron Rodgers had a career-high 48 touchdown passes. Now, I was trying to think, is this just a fluke? Was last season just the only season he was great because it was a revenge thing with the Packers? That's not the case. In season where Aaron Rodgers played at least 10 games, he finished among the fantasy quarterback number 1 5 times. So he's been QB1 5 times in his career. He's been fantasy QB2 3 times in his career, and he's only had 3 career finishes outside of the top 2 in fantasy football, and all of those finishes were still within the top 10. Put some respect on his name. I'm going to snag him early because y'all are crazy, okay?
Yeah, people thought he tried hard last year. I mean, QB7? He's going to tear up the entire division and the NFL. Let's go over somebody else in the division, Marcus, because people forget that David Montgomery was the 4th highest scoring running back in 2020. Right now he's being drafted, wait for this, RB17. Are we sleeping on the bear?
Yeah, I feel like I'm going to do like the disrespectful SpongeBob meme, but his schedule was so easy last year. It's like, you know what? Maybe it was, but he took advantage of it. And we see guys all the time that have favorable schedules and don't produce the way David Montgomery did at the end of the season. Throw in the fact that this year, I know that we can never tell completely how things are going to go, but on paper, the schedule looks pretty good again this year for him. And as Tariq Cohen's rehab has been slowed, that means there's probably more opportunity for Montgomery to be a pass catcher like we saw at the end of last season. So I do feel like there's disrespect, but I do feel like at the same time, it's starting to turn a little bit and people are understanding what the situation is. And I think we're starting to see Montgomery drafted at probably a more reasonable spot.
All right, so I've gone on the record that Tyler Lockett is the most value you can get at wideout in Seattle. He was the 8th highest scoring receiver last year, being drafted outside of the top 20 this year. Are the people wrong, Kimmy?
They're very wrong. They're very wrong on Tyler Lockett. And I think we get confused because when you think of Seattle wideouts, DK Metcalf kind of takes the cake on this one. But people forget Tyler Lockett is lining up opposite of him and also very, very good at fantasy football. Russell Wilson wants to have an MVP-like season. He wants to actually win the division. And all eyes are on Tyler Lockett if he wants to do so. He had career high in fantasy points and fantasy points per game last season, but also in targets and receptions. His stats have improved each and every season these last 3 years. Now, he had 1,000+ scrimmage yards and 8+ touchdowns in 3 straight seasons. He finished as a wideout number 8 in 2020. So I don't know this wide receiver 21 ADP, what's happening here. Like you said, Patrick, best steal at wideout in fantasy football this season. Stop sleeping on Tyler Lockett. Come on.
Go get him. All in on Tyler Lockett. Last but not least, let's talk tight end. After Kelsey and Waller, the 3rd highest scorer at the position last year, it wasn't Kittle, it wasn't Tanyan, it wasn't Hawkinson. It was Logan Thomas, the former quarterback, who probably would have been one of the best quarterbacks on his team last year. He's being drafted like a low-end starting tight end, Marcus. Is that a mistake?
I mean, I think it is, but I will say that I understand people's concern here. I mean, one, that the tight end position has continually let us down over the last few years outside of, the top 3 or 4 guys. But you look at what Logan Thomas did last year. I mean, he ran a ton of routes. In fact, you look at all the tight ends, Logan Thomas ran more routes than anybody. That's Travis Kelsey, that's Darren Waller, all of them. He was 7th in receiving yards among the position, which I think is where people are concerned. But let's remember, as you mentioned, he's a converted quarterback. He's really entering just his 2nd year as a full-time starting tight end. And we know in the past, tight ends take a little while to develop. So I think this is going to be good. I think right now it's a value. And I'm trying to draft Logan Thomas in some spots where I don't get Travis Kelsey because I think a big leap is coming for him this year.
Looking forward to it. Depending on where you drafted all of these guys, these disrespected guys, they might have been fantasy MVPs for you last season. Let's switch gears now and make some picks for 2021 because it's time for MVP picks presented by Visa, a network working to support MVPs on and off the field. We covered the quarterbacks and running backs earlier in the week. Let's get to the wideouts, Marcus. Who is your MVP pick at receiver?
I'm going to go with Stefon Diggs. And, I mean, this is a guy who we thought in Minnesota that he really could be something special, and he was very good in Minnesota. He gets to Buffalo. He becomes their number 1 wide receiver. Josh Allen levels up in terms of a passer, and we see Stefon Diggs just kind of go to the moon, especially fantasy-wise. He's in this Bills offense that last year threw the ball about 60% of the time. I don't see that changing. Diggs was by far the team leader in targets, receptions, and receiving yards. Nothing has changed with the players around him. And I think the only thing that we're waiting for is for him to hit double-digit touchdowns for the first time in his career. I think that can happen this year, and I wouldn't be surprised if he finishes as the wide receiver 1.
Well, you mentioned how good he was in Minnesota. Obviously, he's now a Buffalo Bill, but let's talk about the guy who actually is in Minnesota, the one who had a stud rookie season. Justin Jefferson, I think, could potentially knock Stephon Diggs and even Devontae Adams off of the podium if he sees any type of increase in pass volume this season. Look at what he did last season as a rookie with no proper offseason, no real training camp, and no preseason games. He broke all types of records as a rookie wide receiver. I think year 2 is going to be very plentiful for Justin Jefferson. I see him coming off the boards here in round 2. That's going to pay off as a fantasy wideout MVP this season.
Oh, you want to talk about paying off? I'm going to go with Cooper Kupp, actually. And it starts with the fact that I believe in the Stafford-era Rams, and while Robert Woods is going to get a ton of work, the fact that Cooper Kupp is going right now as the 18th wideout, to me, is a huge value. Yes, he only had the 3 scores a year ago, and that's probably why he's going where he is. But in the last 2 years, he's led the team in red zone targets. The same guys calling the plays. They got a better quarterback this time around. I'm all about it. I think the value you can get with Cooper Kupp will get you where you need to be, and that'll make him the fantasy MVP at wide receiver to me. Let's get to the tight ends, Marcus. Who you got?
I'm going to go with Darren Waller here. And I think for me, it's a little bit about what his production is going to be versus where you're drafting him. Look, you still have to draft him high. There's no doubt about that. But you're talking about maybe a late second, early third round pick on Darren Waller with outsized production. I mean, there was a large gap between the top 2 or 3 tight ends and everybody else last year. The last 2 years, Waller has 262 targets. The next closest player to him is Hunter Renfro at 148. So you're talking about a 114 target difference. I don't expect that gap to close significantly just because we're still trying to figure out where the Raiders are going to go consistently at wide receiver. So, having to spend maybe a third round pick to get a guy that can give you Kelsey-like production, I think that's pretty valuable.
You just mentioned him, Kelsey-like production. That's just because Travis Kelce is going to be the tight end MVP yet again. I think he has been for the last 4 seasons, finishing as the number 1 tight end at his position. And that's just because he's that good. I think about volume. I think about regression. Obviously, Travis Kelce is very popular. He's been great. But just looking at his numbers in 2020, those are all career highs. 105 receptions, over 1,400 receiving yards, 11 touchdowns. My doorbell's going off because we're all excited about Travis Kelce. It's a pretty easy one that he'll be an MVP yet again.
No, Kimmy, what happened was you abandoned your Hawkeye, George Kittle. And so he's banging on the door trying to get in because we've covered all the top tier tight ends. So let me make the case for George Kittle, which is the only way I can do that is say you're getting a value perhaps of a Waller and Kelsey, and you're doing it at a different price. Injuries happen. Newsflash, football isn't good for you. Everybody can get hurt. George Kittle was one of the best in the league. He's still one of the best in the leagues, and you can get him. Maybe you can snag Kittle on the way back after the first round. He almost got 16 points per game since 2018. Plenty of value there, and Kimmy gave up on him. So, George, come to my fantasy team and score points for me because I'm faithful, not like Kimmy, who had to choose her Kansas City Chief over her Iowa Hawkeye. Here we go. Still ahead. We could easily see 5 or more rookie quarterbacks on the field this season. What will the ripple effects of these new signal callers mean for your fantasy team? Our expert predictions next on NFL Fantasy Live, presented by EA Sports Madden NFL 22. We're back on NFL Fantasy Live, presented by EA Sports, Madden NFL 22. If you want to dominate your fantasy leagues this season, be sure to watch the Fantasy Draft Spectacular, presented by SundayTicket.tv. Adam Rank is joined by fantasy experts, NFL legends, and celebrities in a 2-hour special to break down this year's top players, breakouts, rookies, sleepers, and more. Watch the Fantasy Draft Spectacular next Tuesday live at 5 p.m. Eastern in the NFL Fantasy app, the NFL app, NFL.com, and YouTube. The show will also be available on demand. Back here with Kimmy Checks and Marcus Grant. It's time for Unexpected Performance, presented by EA Sports and Madden NFL 22. In fantasy football, no one expects a rookie quarterback to be a league winner, but they can definitely be difference makers and change some things. And fantasy managers have to be prepared, Marcus. Tell us which rookie is piquing your interest.
It's Zach Wilson with the Jets. And let me just preface this by saying I'm not telling you to go out and draft Zach Wilson as your QB1. I think he's potentially an option for you in 2 quarterback leagues or super flex leagues. But the reason I'm interested in Zach Wilson is what he means for the rest of the pieces in that offense. I love Elijah Moore. I know a lot of fantasy analysts do. I like what Michael Carter can be at the running back spot. Let's not forget they went out and they signed Corey Davis, who I think can be very productive. But part of this means they need a quarterback who can deliver the football on time and on target. And we have seen that so far in the preseason with Zach Wilson. Now, I know things will ratchet up once we get to the regular season, but this kind of gives me an added level of confidence that maybe this Jets offense is going to be intriguing and inspiring. And certainly with where you're picking these guys up in drafts, there's potential for some fantasy value there as long as Wilson continues to develop.
Now, Marcus, there's no question that Zach Wilson will be the starting quarterback for the Jets, but in Chicago, it's a little bit murky. Now, regardless of that, I have eyes on Justin Fields, straight because of what we've seen in the preseason thus far. His stats, pretty darn good. You see him right here, 23 for 39, 222 passing yards, a passing touchdown, 79 rushing yards, a rushing touchdown as well. Now, the big question is, when is he going to take the field? Patrick, you and I covered the preseason game last weekend. We said maybe it's after that first game. Maybe Andy Dalton is a sacrificial lamb as the Bears face the Rams. But once Justin Fields gets on the field, I think his 14th round ADP is a little bit cheap for him because of what he can do. This means incredible things for Allen Robinson, who's been even productive without less than admirable quarterback play in Chicago. I'm excited for Justin Fields. I think both him, Allen Robinson, even Darnell Mooney, Adam Rank's favorite sleeper, are going to have incredible fantasy seasons.
So much promise. We just need to keep Justin Fields safe. And as you mentioned, Kimmy, perhaps having him not play week 1 is the way to go. We're also watching to see when Trey Lance is going to eventually take over. It's not a question of if, it's when. And I think he's just going to alter things for some of these other skill guys on this team, like your current running back 29, Raheem Mostert, your current wide receiver 37, Deebo Samuel, guys who can directly benefit from the numbers advantage that Lance is going to give Kyle Shanahan in the running game. If you have the roster spots, go ahead and stash away some of these guys that we've all talked about, some of the guys playing around these rookie quarterbacks. When we come back, what to make of last year's rookie standouts? What will Justin Herbert do to take the next step towards elite status in fantasy? Is Deandre Swift even in the top running back position in Detroit? We'll make our predictions for the sophomores next on NFL Fantasy Live, presented by EA Sports, Madden NFL 22.
Waller, touchdown! CEH, what a night for the rookie Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
Jackpot, baby! Try to keep up with Rodgers. You can't catch this guy.
Touchdown, James Robinson for the Jaguar.
Jefferson, yes, on the run. Touchdown by this dynamic rookie, Justin Jefferson.
Lamb, what a catch! What an acrobatic play.
Caught by T. Higgins. Touchdown, T. Higgins.
And that's a big-time run for Deandre Swift. Poised under pressure. Justin Herbert does it again.
Herbert having a day.
It's time for Going Strong, presented by Castrol Edge, as we look at last year's rookie standouts to predict who will have a sophomore slump or who will make a sophomore surge. Kimmy, will Justin Herbert keep going strong in year 2?
I love Justin Herbert, let me say that. And I think he's going to be consistent. I don't quite think it'll be a slump. If anything, I think he has the floor and the ceiling for his numbers to surge a little bit. Now, I know in the last block we were talking about rookie quarterbacks. Can they do it? Justin Herbert was a rookie quarterback who did it last season, especially in terms of fantasy football. Now, we understand his pass catchers are there. We're all waiting for yet another Keenan Allen breakout season, Mike Williams as well. But the thing that I'm excited for with Justin Herbert taking the field for the second year is that he gets back a healthy Austin Eckler. We understand that he's kind of an Alvin Kamara type of running back where he can not only run the ball, but also catch passes. Justin Herbert should stay pretty consistent with the capabilities and the abilities to even surge just a little bit.
He had the best rookie quarterback, arguably, season in history with Anthony Lynn as head coach. Now DeAndre Swift has Anthony Lynn calling plays. Marcus, what do you see from him?
Well, I don't think it's going to be quite as good for DeAndre Swift as it was for Justin Herbert. I think you're going to see a bit of a sophomore slump for Swift. I mean, I think what we saw last year was nice, but it also looks like the Lions want to use Jamal Williams. That was one of the things Anthony Lynn said right away, that he sees Williams as kind of a 1A back. And you're talking about two guys sharing time and what I think is going to be kind of a bad offense this year. I preferred to take Williams just because of where he's coming off the board. Now you've got head coach Dan Campbell saying he's worried about Swift's week 1 availability. This just is not shaping up to be a nice sophomore season for DeAndre Swift.
Oh, a slump. We don't like slumps. I'm going to surge. I got to surge for everybody. And it's Jerry Judy. And I'm doing so regardless of who Vic Fangio decides is the starting quarterback. But I'm definitely doing it if it's Teddy Bridgewater that's the starter. The pairing is a bit too perfect for me. Remember how Teddy carried 3 top 25 wideouts a year ago? I remember. Judy had more targets than anyone a year ago in Denver. Surge, like the beverage from the late 90s, which we all loved and appreciated so much. What about Chase Claypool, Kimmy? Surge or slump?
I'm staying on your surge train. I'm surging for Chase Claypool. Now, I'm calling it now that he emerges as the #1 wideout for the Pittsburgh Steelers this season. He had 62 catches and 873 yards last season, which matches similar numbers of DK Metcalf in his rookie season when he had 58 catches for 900 yards. Now, I make this comparison because they're both these big-bodied receivers, and that's the thing that Chase Claypool has over Deontay Johnson and over Juju Smith-Schuster. This is going to be an amazing year 2. Surging, surging, surging all the way for Chase Claypool.
Big, fast, wideout surging. What about the one in Santa Clara, Marcus? Is Brandon Ayuk surging as well?
Oh, we're going to keep the surge going. I am a huge fan. I'm hashtag Team Ayuk all day long. We saw last year why the 49ers traded up to get him over some receivers that people thought were going to go higher. He carried this 49er offense last year at times when George Kittle and Deebo Samuel were hurt. And with all the reports out of camp, it looks like Ayuk has taken over as the team's wide receiver 1. I think he's the most versatile of this group. They even gave him a handful of carries. He had 77 rushing yards and a pair of rushing touchdowns last year. I do think he takes a big step forward this year.
Surging. We're finishing with the surge. That's all our time for today. We're back for one more episode of Fantasy Live on NFL.com and the NFL apps Friday at 6 Eastern. Don't forget to sign up for your league today and set your DVRs for our big return to NFL Network Monday evening. Looking forward to that and looking forward to seeing you then. And looking forward to you having a nice draft. We'll see you on Friday.